Are we on silent mode until we actually officially start the meeting?
Apparently not.
No, we're just,
Or are we just staring out into space?
yeah, we're just staring out into space.
Okay,
I think it's called deep thought.
that's a nice way to frame it. Yeah.
I always feel a little bit more nervous when there's a public hearing or something more formal going on.
I forgot my tie.
Right? Me too. I thought about, back when I first joined the planning board and we weren't all remote. I guess if we were remote already, but kind of like the expectation was there. We someday would just go back into town hall. I was like, I should just get a suit and wear a suit 100% of the time.
I've learned practicing law, one has to adjust one's costume to the setting. In a place like Shutesbury, if a lawyer walks in wearing, $1,000 Armani suit, or I guess they cost more, several $1,000s, you're clearly identifying yourself as a foreigner. In Amherst, you don't wear a tie. If you're down in the larger places in Hampden County, you better wear a nice suit.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, in
Yeah.
Springfield, you betcha.
Well,
Yeah.
hey, it is 7:01. We do have a quorum present, so I will call this meeting of the Shutesbury Planning Board for September 8th to order. First, I will note that the meeting is being recorded. I'll note that Nathan Murphy, Michael De Chiara, Steve Bressler, Keith Hasty are present. Associate member Tom Seifert is present. And not sure who is, did I miss anybody who's here? I don't think so.
Yeah, Gail Huntress is here from the broadband team. This is tangentially related to what we do, so I'm just listening in.
Excellent. Well, we're glad you're here. As well as any other members of the public that are here. For the time being, I'll designate Tom to act as a full member. Unless we end up getting all 7 of our full members present. And
Okay.
this time I'll ask if what's that, Tom?
I just said, okay.
Excellent. I'm glad you're ready, as always. Is there anyone here that would like to make public comment that is not related to the public hearing we are about to begin in a few minutes? I am hearing and seeing none. Is there anybody who is here who is interested in speaking with us about landowner education and guidance? That would be, if we were to start that now, we would probably just cover the high level and pick it up after the hearing, but I'm not hearing or seeing any. I'll note Ashley Pycroft has joined the meeting as a full member of the planning board. Welcome, Ashley.
Good evening.
You haven't missed much, Ashley. So far, nobody wants to make a public comment or anything else, so.
Okay.
So I'm just, we're just now going to hang tight for a few minutes. Let people filter in.
Is Donna McNichol going to be here? Do you know?
I don't know. She didn't mention specifically that she's coming.
I didn't get the impression she was coming.
Yeah. Has anyone heard from Deacon or Jeff as to whether they might be not coming or coming? No? Okay. Okay, it is 7:05, so I will open up the public hearing for the planning board to consider a proposed amendment to the Shutesbury zoning bylaw. To start, I'll just read the public notice that was sent out, I believe, to the Greenfield Reporter. Shutesbury Planning Board will hold a virtual public hearing on Monday, September 8th at 7:05 PM to consider an amendment to the Shutesbury zoning bylaw that addresses data centers, establishing a prohibition in all districts and a moratorium through June 30th, 2026. The following sections of the zoning bylaw will be amended. The definition section will add a definition for data centers. The use table will add data centers as an industrial use. And a new section under supplemental uses will enact the moratorium. The purpose of the moratorium is to provide adequate time for the planning board to develop reasonable regulations for data centers to be considered at 2026 annual town meeting. Additional information is available through the Shutesbury Town Clerk or on the town website. I would like to note that Jeff Weston has joined. Welcome, Jeff. Glad you're here.
Nathan, you want me to, or do you want to read the proposed warrant article as a way to kick this off?
Yeah, that would be great if you want to take that, Michael.
Sure. So just because not everyone was here at our last meeting, it's a public hearing, I'll just say, when the planning board met on August 11th, we took the following vote. The planning board supports a one-year moratorium for the installation of data centers in Shutesbury. A data center is defined as a facility composed of network computers, storage systems, and computing resources used to process, store, and disseminate large amounts of data, and that such a facility is either a principal use or is used in a standalone capacity. Further, that the chair is empowered to conduct all procedural steps to achieve this objective. So that's what we voted on August 11th. Subsequent to that, Nathan and I checked in with town council and crafted the warrant article that's slightly different, but the intent is the same. So the actual warrant article is to see, it's entitled Moratorium Prohibition on Data Centers. And the text is to see if the town will establish a moratorium on the application for an installation of data centers by amending the town of Shutesbury zoning bylaw by adding a new use in section 3.1-1 use table, by adding a new section under Article 8 supplementary regulations, 8.13, and then I think I'm missing a number there, and then moratorium and adding a new article, which is moratorium on data centers, and by adding a new definition to section 13.2 definitions, or take any other action related thereto. So in the use table, we would create under industrial section a new category called data centers under all four zones: rural residential, FC, town center, and Lake Wyola. They would all be not prohibited. Under definitions, the definition is data center, a facility composed of network computers, storage systems, and computing resources that is used to process, store, and disseminate large amounts of data, and that such a facility is either a principal use or is used in a standalone capacity. And then there's a new section 813, which is what Donna had suggested to us. And that is 813, moratorium on data centers. And this is where the change is. The town of Shutesbury shall enact a moratorium on the application for and building of new data centers as defined in section 13.2 of the Shutesbury bylaw. That's the definition section. The purpose of the moratorium is to provide the Shutesbury Planning Board with sufficient time to research and understand this complex use so that reasonable regulation can be developed for consideration at spring 2026 Shutesbury Town Meeting. The moratorium will be in effect starting on September 30th, 2025. Upon adoption at special town meeting, the moratorium will be in place until June 20th, 2026. So,
Michael,
yes,
what did you say in the use table was there?
the use table is that it's under the section of industrial, there's a new category called data centers. And in all four zoned regions, it would not be allowed.
Okay.
And
I wasn't
so,
sure what I heard said. I wanted to make sure it was clear, just in case anyone had the same
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
mishearing I did, but it's
So-
would not permitted, right?
right, correct. And so just like I just read it, but to explain a little bit of what we got from talking to Donna, is that we need a new section that's the 8.13, the moratorium data centers, that has specific dates of when it starts and when it ends, because the Attorney General would want to see that. We had to have a reason, which is for us as a planning board to understand the issues so we can come up with and craft an appropriate regulation. And so we, in the vote that we took last month, we said a year. This is a little less than a year, so it would start on September 30th when we have special town meeting, and it would go through June. It should be June 30th.
Yeah.
I guess we can change that after the hearing.
Oh, it says June 20th.
Yeah, it should be June 30th. So running through June 30th with the assumption that at special town meeting, we will have crafted and presented a bylaw that can be voted upon. And at that point, we can change the use table. Presumably, we probably won't change the definition, but anything can be changed once we come up with it. But the idea is that we would substitute the current use table in an presented and hopefully approved bylaw at annual town meeting in 2026. And we can strike the moratorium because that would no longer be relevant. So that's how we got to where we are today. How did I
Thank
do,
you, Mike.
Nathan?
That's good. It's good. At this time, I will be opening up the floor to members of the public. So I'm going to ask that people either, turn your camera on and raise your hand, or if you can, we're all on Zoom, right? So if you go to, there's either a raise hand button you can use. Sometimes it's under like a react button you have to press, but depending on what your setup is. After I go through any members of the public who wish to provide comment, I'll open up the discussion to members of the planning board present. And at that point, there's going to be more discussion that ensues after any planning board member that kind of initially says they want to speak has spoken. I'll open it back up more broadly if people have follow-up questions or additional thoughts, based on the discussion that's taken place. So that's just kind of a high-level structure of what to expect as we proceed through the hearing. And at this time, we'll proceed with anyone who would like to make a public comment. I see Michael Pill,
Yeah,
please.
this is my law firm video, so that's why that name is there. I'll just briefly read, it'll take less than a minute, an email I wrote yesterday. Data to the planning board, data centers not being specifically allowed are currently prohibited under Shutesbury's, and the word is in quotations, prohibitive zoning bylaw, which expressly states as follows in section 3.1-1 on page 7. And that's 3.1-1 use table. And I quote, "The use table that follows indicates allowable uses in the district shown. See Article 13 for definitions of the use categories." And here's the key phrase: uses that are not listed below are prohibited unless state or federal laws preclude such prohibition. Okay, that's what the zoning bylaw says. So what that means is you don't need a prohibition against a specific use. It is unnecessary a sneaky lawyer might even claim, well, gee, if you feel the need to start enacting prohibitions against specific uses, then maybe that general prohibition doesn't mean what it really says. And you should really be listing every specific use you don't want, which is, of course, why the case law supports a prohibitive zoning bylaw, which in plain English means the only uses that are allowed are those that are expressly described as being allowed in the zoning bylaw. Everything else is blanket prohibited. In other words, there's no need for a specific prohibition, and it's already prohibited. There's nothing in Chapter 48, Section 3, unlike solar, for example, or nonprofit, educational, or religious, that overrides local zoning. Donna sent me an email. She said, I don't disagree with your analysis, but the point here was to have a moratorium on this very specific use until the planning board could study and draft a bylaw. And I certainly agree with that. And it sounds like that's your focus. So I guess my point is you don't need a prohibition. But if you want to enact a moratorium to send the message that indeed you are dealing with it and you're working on it, I agree with Donna about that. And God knows with our tax rate, who knows? It's possible with proper conditions, something like this might even meet the board's approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And Mr. Dick, is there something you would like to interject with at this time?
I just had a question for you in terms of process. Are you thinking we're just hear everybody and not respond and then maybe subsequently have discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
like I was going to kind of go through, and I don't know if anyone on the planning board is like prepared like a written kind of statement or something they're going to read from, or and then we'll have our usual banter.
No, I just wanted to clarify, because if we're not responding to what Michael said, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that we weren't being rude. That wasn't the process.
Right. Yeah. No, I would like to. Yeah. That's exactly right, Michael. I would like to go through if anyone else wants to make comment, and then I'll give the board a chance to make comment and respond to other comments, and then we'll have a broad discussion. We'll allow people to come back if they want to, so on and so forth. Now, is there any other member of the public here who would like to provide comment on the proposed zoning amendment? Looks like people are mostly just here for the show. Well, Mr. Pill, thank you very much for providing comment tonight. And at this time, I will turn to the members of the planning board to see if there's, I see Gail has put her hand up, not too late. Gail, if you would like to make comment, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. It's just a comment that as you go through this process, it would be great if you could keep me in the loop. And the reason is because the little I know about data centers is that they need a connection. They need an internet connection to the larger world. And so it could be an opportunity for us as the municipal light plant to sell dark fiber or even a full backhaul connection to whatever entity it is. It has a lot to do with kind of like where it's sited, if they have any other options in town. There's no other providers of high-speed internet fiber besides our own network. So this is just more of a request coming from my committee to yours, saying, keep me in the loop so that we can contribute to the decision in some way of how we can serve this and how it can be beneficial for Shutesbury if we decide to pursue it. Because anything that we sell to some kind of private entity could offset the cost that everybody in town pays for their connection. Does that all make sense?
Yes, Gail, thank you. I would just you mentioned two things, like, regular fiber or some sort of back-end connection or something. Could you kind of repeat that and maybe break it down Barney style for those of us who aren't necessarily familiar with the infrastructure involved in that?
Sure, sure. It's not too complicated. So let's say that there's a data center that's built next to the Shutesbury Elementary School, just say. And they will use a massive amount of electricity, and that's kind of their biggest usage. But the other thing that they're going to use is data, their data center, right? So they have to connect to the larger internet, and you need to buy your connection. So the question is, who do they buy that connection from? Depending on their location, they could buy it from a company like Verizon to connect to the wider internet, but then they could also buy it from us because we're a provider. And so that would be a kind of a direct purchase of, we're going to buy our bandwidth. So kind of like the size of the data pipeline, which could range from just gigabytes to terabytes. It could be huge. And so we would act as the middleman and kind of resell the pipeline of information access to them. There's a second way to get that data, and that's through something called dark fiber, where all we act is the, let's see, how do I analogize this? We supply the empty pipe, but we don't put anything in the pipeline. So we don't actually sell the data, but we say, okay, we'll connect you to a main center down in Springfield. And believe it or not, our connection goes all the way down there because that's how we provide redundancy in our network and safety to get back to the wider internet. We just don't have one little tiny point, like on our border with Amherst where we connect. We go all the way down to Springfield to make sure that our network is really reliable. So anyway, that's another way that we could sell a asset to one of these data centers by saying, we'll either sell you the bandwidth directly, we'll sell you the pipe and what goes through the pipe, or we'll just sell you the pipe and you can fill it with whatever you want. We'll just provide the infrastructure to get where you want to go. Does that clear it up at all?
Yes, thank you. That's very interesting. Okay. I appreciate the clarification there. I noticed a few people have jumped into the hearing, so I just want to catch everyone up that we've opened up the hearing, and right now we're taking comments from the public. And right now, I know I've asked people to either raise your hand with Zoom, or if you have your camera on, you can raise your hand if you would like to comment. Is there anybody who has just recently hopped on the call who would like to make a comment, or anyone for that matter that wants to a member of the public who would like to make a comment on the proposed amendment? Okay, I'm hearing and seeing none. And Gail, I will ask if you would to just put your hand back down so that we don't get too confused here.
Well, now you're presuming that I can figure out how to do that. Just give me a second.
I know. It's
There we go. I did it.
okay. So and just to reiterate what we'll do now, I'm going to open it up to the board to go around, and anyone who wants to say anything can, and then we'll just, after that, it'll be more or less a free for all. I mean, we're going to maintain order, of course, but we'll just it'll be more like the usual dialogue that you tend to see at planning board meetings here. Michael.
So I thought I would just cover a couple of things that we talked about last time, and then maybe just respond to Michael's point, which you also discussed last time, but just sort of do a little bit of summary, because I think since people are interested, if that makes sense. So, this all started because we got an inquiry in town about bylaws about data centers during the summer. And then we brought that back and did a little research. And I think on the concern part, the things that rose up from looking at research, of what's going on in the country, there are things that have to get looked at in terms of regulation, so that data centers use, depending on how big or small they are, but they use lots of water, they use lots of electricity. They have exhaust because they have backup generators. There's noise. They may or may not require lots of land. They do require security and lighting, and they're 24/7 operations. So those are things that we identified as a board that were things that we might want to regulate. We definitely had some members, I think to Gail's point, talking about revenue generation, and to Michael's point, that, if there's a possibility that it could be designed in an appropriate way to fit into Shutesbury that would generate electricity, generate revenue. The other thing I think in terms of that came up previously is that the school probably, with our current definition, probably, has a data center because they're backing up, their computers. And we're very clear that Shutesbury Net has probably some backup. So depending on the definition, that also might be considered a data center currently. And while municipal uses would be able to do it no matter what, we wanted to make sure that we didn't unintentionally create problems in any kind of regulation. And I think the last thing I'd say, just in response to what Michael was saying, we did discuss, and it is accurate, about section 3.1 in terms of allowable uses in the use table, that it was not specifically mentioned. The concern, and I think the reason that we're putting forth a proposed amendment and moratorium is twofold. One is that we're just coming off of a potential lawsuit. And I think we've collectively realized that pretty much anything can be argued by anybody. And so we do have a situation where with the Wheelock track, we did not have a solar category at the time that Wheelock was proposed. And it's like put into light industrial. And so one could argue, if one wanted to, that this could be light industrial, and we didn't want that just to happen sideways. And we didn't want to get sued for someone saying, no, in fact, you have precedent. We wanted to be really specific and buy time. So it seemed like the most prudent way to do it was to identify what the use was, put a moratorium on it, and then come back in some thoughtful manner, in terms of town meeting, but give us some time. But it seems like these things are evolving, and, AI is just growing rapidly. So we wanted to have a little breathing room. And then I think the last thing I would say that we discussed is there are different sizes and different types of data centers. And Keith had brought this up originally, that the issue of scale is really important for Shutesbury. So it's the use, but it's also the scale. And so I think part of the development of our regulation is to try to figure out how can these be designed, regulated so that an appropriate scale, if there is one, and we don't know the answer to that yet, could be allowed and where it would be allowed. So I think generally wanting to figure out how do we do this thoughtfully so that we can regulate appropriately. So I think that's pretty much how we got here and why we're proposing what we're proposing.
Thank you, Michael. Covered quite a bit there. I guess one thing I wonder if, well, I don't know, I guess I'll just kind of let people say their piece and maybe circle back to it. But I see Ashley has her hand up. Ashley, take it away, please.
All right, I just have a question for Gail, since you're here, Gail. I'm wondering about our capacity, like what kind of capacity? Oh, thanks. What kind of capacity do we have as far as how much connectivity we could potentially sell to interested developers for a data center?
Now Gail has to figure out how to unmute. She's mastered the hand thing.
No, it looks like you almost had it for a minute there, Gail.
Yes.
There it is.
Sorry,
All right.
sorry about that. I'm not in a great connection. Can you repeat that?
Yeah.
You froze and then I missed that entire question. I apologize.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm wondering about the kind of capacity that we have with our Shutesbury net. Like, could we handle something like this? And of course, the question of scale, a smaller one. I don't think it's likely that a giant data center is going to come to Shutesbury, but could our infrastructure handle the kind of things that we're talking about selling?
It depends on what the center wants. If they want say a dedicated fiber going all the way to Springfield, then we would provide part of that, going, and then it would be probably some kind of handoff to another provider. The nice thing about fiber is that it's almost limitless in terms of its capacity, as long as you can upgrade the head end electronics. So it's a really hard answer to give, but I guess mostly yes, unless they want something really, really enormous. It may incur some costs to provide whatever they need, but we would pass that on to them, right? It wouldn't be something like, oh, we're gonna do this and then pass the cost on to Shutesbury residents, because it would be a commercial deal, not a residential providership arrangement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question, Ashley. Is there any other member of the planning board who would like to make statements regarding this amendment this time?
I got another one.
Even though, go ahead.
Okay, maybe Michael knows the answer to this, and I'm just letting you all know at any point a bunch of teenage boys could come in here and I ask forgiveness for anything they say. So I'm wondering if anybody knows if the state is working on regulations for these. Because it sounds like Michael Pill, that you said that there's nothing in Chapter 40A, Section 3 right now that the state has to say about them.
Nothing that I know of. And, unlike solar, daycare centers, agriculture, religious, educational, I mean, the Dover Amendment, which is what Chapter 40A, Section 3 is called after a 1950s court case when it was first enacted, it's become like a Christmas tree. There's also provisions for sober recovery houses in there, and disabled people's housing, but I don't know of anything relating to data centers.
Yeah, I would just tracking the legislation. There's nothing in the works I'm aware of. I think more pertinent or equally pertinent is that the administration is, very open to AI and pushing AI. And so in order to make AI work, you have to have data centers. So I think on the administration side, they're trying to roll these things out. And, I don't know if there's legislation regarding that, but the administration definitely is trying to cite them. And there is, I don't think there's any guidance at this point. It's emerging.
Thank you.
So
Steve.
isn't there maybe you don't know the answer to this, Michael, but sounds like there's a conflict though between reaching a certain energy goal by 2030 and AI. Those two things are not in the same, they're not running parallel.
You are a genius, Steve. Yes. I like a month ago, I wrote to the climate chief and I said, like, what gives? If we're pushing AI on one hand and we're trying to do decarbonization on the other hand with a climate goal, yeah, I think it's an issue of one silo not talking to the other silo. I mean, hopefully someone's trying to balance it, but I have not seen that yet.
Okay. So one other quick observation. It sounds to me like with this moratorium, we're kind of committing ourselves to developing a bylaw and not relying on the use table, correct?
Well, I think the first part's accurate. You know, that we are committing that, you know, by the time annual town meeting comes around, we will have, you know, a proposed bylaw to bring to town meeting. And I think, I mean, this is just me, but my sense is that you know, whatever the proposal would be, it'd be that there's 3 probably parts. If we like the definition we have, we can keep it, but we can tweak the definition. That'll go into the definition section. I think the use table, I would suggest we keep the category of data centers and just figure out, you know, how they're regulated. So maybe it goes anywhere from not prohibited to by right and everything in between. So it depends on what the zoning is. So I think we would keep the use table, but figure out what that looks like per zone. And then just like we did with solar and marijuana and all the other, you know, wireless stuff, we would come up with, we'd probably swap out 8.13 for moratorium of data centers, just call it data centers, and put whatever we want in there. So I think that's how I foresee it happening, with the vast majority of the discussion being how we build out the language around 8.13.
Okay.
Jeff, would you like to speak? Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
would, if I would. I appreciate
just
everyone's,
wanna-
can you hear me?
I'm sorry. I just want to thank Steve for his comments as well before, but Steve, Jeff, please.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone's concern about this. You know, I remember a few years back, I don't know, maybe 5 or so years back, perhaps even less, when we had very little rain, and we certainly knew wells that were failing in Shutesbury. Neighbors' wells were failing and not able to get enough water and so forth. And that's just our own houses drawing the water in Shutesbury in the aquifer that we have. Of course, we don't know the potential of our aquifer, but we do know that in a drought situation, it was failing for some houses. It's hard for me to imagine. I haven't done a lot of research in data centers, but the one I read about was taking 500,000 gallons of water a day. It's hard for me to imagine, even on a smaller scale, of that being advisable or desirable in a town that already has had wells fail in time of drought. So I think a moratorium is a great idea. It's hard for me to imagine actually voting for a data center in our town, but we should certainly talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay. I see, Tom, you've got your hand up. Would you like to speak?
Thanks. Yeah, I kind of wanted just to talk about the siloing and a little bit of what Jeff just mentioned, whether during the process we might be able, I don't know how it works, because this would be a planning board discussion, but to bring in potentially health issues that the Board of Health might be able to address about the effects on water, on public water supply, or the quality of water, and the noise and the lighting issues that might be at play in terms of how they would ally with or existing state health regulations, or whether the town would be interested, the Board of Health, in looking at a regulation towards data centers perhaps. And separately, I was also wondering about the benefits that could come to the town from something like this. Would they be at all tax related? Because I could be wrong, but I understand kind of just one tax rate in town. And something like solar would give a pilot, in lieu of taxes, a payment. But would there be a ability to bring in the assessors or whoever's involved for the purposes and be tax a data center in a way that gives more revenue to the town for it, or alleviates other people's taxes in some way? And I know that's probably for Denver. I just wanted to express on now.
Is anyone else having a little bit of trouble hearing everything Tom was saying with connection? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So Tom, you're coming through a little bit spotty. What I heard was you wanted to talk about silos, and you mentioned the possibility of consulting with the Board of Health for potential regulations pertaining to data centers regarding the impacts on water, light, and noise.
Mhm.
And then you started to talk about, there might have been some other details in the middle, and you started to say something about taxes, and that part especially, I didn't fully hear what your question or comment was on that. Would you want to try and repeat that part?
Sure. Can you just let me know if I'm coming through clearly now?
What, yeah.
Okay, because I couldn't notice any of my whatever happened. For the tax question, I was wondering about whether it would be possible to bring into the discussion whether data centers might be taxed differently in a way that would help alleviate residents' taxes, or perhaps contribute more per whatever square foot, or how things are taxed. Because I don't understand perfectly the taxing situation in town, but I don't know if there are different tax rates for different uses, and I'm not aware that there are. And since this wouldn't be like an exempt from taxes project, would it be helpful to bring in the assessors or somebody involved with the tax revenue issue down the line, if that makes sense? That was about what I said, I think.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I guess, so Michael, would you like to address something specifically that Tom said?
Yeah, two things. One is we don't have a different tax rate for residential and commercial. So if this would be commercial, so that would be an opportunity to sort of look at different tax rate. The other thing, not to put people on the spot, but both Kat Hilton and Arlene are both on the Board of Health. So I don't know, given the issues that Tom raised, if it seems like we would probably take Gail up on the shared checking in with between boards about making sure that as this process of developing a bylaw goes forward, that we check in with the MLP. Presumably do the same thing with the Board of Health, but maybe if you guys want to request that now, that might be helpful.
So, Catherine or Arlene, as sitting members of the Board of Health, is there any response you'd like to make at this time? I'm not seeing any of you come off mute. See, Arlene has come off mute. Are you about to speak, Arlene?
Yeah, so there's a lot I don't know about data centers, but I am learning that there, as has already been mentioned by Jeff, the need for water is monumental, and that water's also got to be disposed of somehow. So, and that water has the potential to contain all sorts of potential contaminants to the aquifer. And so it's mostly on this water consumption and water disposal that I think currently we have concerns. And we're all learning about this as we go. But and also Jeff mentioned very appropriately the noise and light issues to abutters. And so setback requirements are something that we would need to research, and where in the town such a facility could be sited is hard for me to imagine. without it being a very intrusive presence. So as I said, this is new to all of us and we're learning as we go, but these are some of the concerns that are on my mind anyway. I don't know if Catherine has anything further to add to that, but.
Well, Arlene, thank you very much for your comments. I would like to, and Michael, I do see you, and I'm gonna try and make sure that if there's any other board members that are gonna, it's starting to get a little bit, I see Keith and Steve are putting their hands back up. But before we move on, I would like to ask Arlene, you mentioned the potential for contamination in water from data centers, and I was just wondering if this is something that you've if you have any source on that you would be happy to share with us.
No, I don't, but I understand that their water consumption is a matter of cooling, and so cooling the data processing.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's true that there are some
But
data
I
centers.
do not know what the potential contaminants are, but I'd like it to be something that we, with you, explore. We can explore and work with the planning board to become better informed about this.
Okay, so you haven't heard any specific piece of information that cited
No, I haven't.
contaminated water? Okay.
No, I have not.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I mean, we would definitely want to know about that. If anyone has, please feel free to send it to us. I mean, that's a question I would have myself. Okay, so I saw Keith with the hand up, and then we'll go back to Steve. And Michael Pill is also on the radar as well. So Keith first.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it, Nathan. And I'm going to get back to the scale issue that Michael Vecchiara mentioned earlier. Is that I think in our mind's eye, people are envisioning a big mega structure, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a big mega structure. As Ashley mentioned, technically the school might be acting as a data center. And I'm thinking it might also be something as innocuous as you'll find in almost every town a telephone exchange. Usually a brick building with no windows, maybe a couple stories high. I think there's one on Lincoln Avenue. I think it's Verizon now, probably started out as one of the Bell companies. That kind of just blends into the neighborhood. It's not any kind of highly lit, again, mega structure. So I think we need to, again, and keep in mind that these things could range from something the size of a trailer, perhaps, to the size of a large house or small warehouse, and not get over our skis envisioning something massive. And again, as far as cooling water, some may use cooling water, some may not. Some may be air cooled. So I think without having anything proposed, and again, we have nothing even remotely proposed, we're kind of getting ourselves wound up over a lot of conjecture, I guess, and a lot of what ifs and worst case ideas. So that's it.
Thank you, Keith. Steve Bressler.
Yeah, so these are all good comments and all good concerns, and they all lead to why we need the moratorium to do our homework. I'll give you one quick example because I've just touched the surface on research, and I mean just scratch the surface. But with regards to water, as Keith said, there's air cooled, but then there's also immersion cooling. And there's two types of immersion cooling, one that uses PFAS liquid and one that uses hydrogen-based biodegradable liquid. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm just saying there's a lot of homework we have to do to create an informed bylaw and condition, a bylaw. So all good comments. We don't need to get into the weeds right now because we just are talking about the amendment and the moratorium. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. And now I'll circle back to Michael Pill.
I just wanted to note, if they're going to use water, if it's over 10,000 gallons a day, my recollection is the Board of Health loses jurisdiction to DEP as the permit granting authority, but Shutesbury does have private well regulations. So if they're going to use water, the Board of Health might want to dust off the private well regulations and see, for example, if there's any maximum number of gallons. And from a perspective of zoning, I think there's no problem in specifying how the cooling needs to be done. And you can simply, and so, Keith and Steve's comments are very, very valuable there, because you can simply specify that we're not going to have water cooling that would require a well and a septic system. And frankly, if I was a developer, it's hard to imagine, I know, what even residential septic systems cost nowadays, where you can find the soil conditions suitable for them. And one thing I generally tell people who are interested in rural housing is, when it comes to drilling a well, there's only two outcomes. Either they hit water of sufficient quantity and quality, or you run out of money. And as you probably all know, I mean, it's unbelievably hit or miss. Our house behind ours has a 175-foot deep well. The neighboring house 300 feet away has a 400-foot deep well. And the poor guys who rebuilt the parsonage across the street next to the fire station, the well driller was so long, I went over and talked to them, and they were down over 700 feet. So
Wow. Wow.
you never ever know, and that might be a way to incentivize some alternative system. And what Steve and Keith have also pointed out is you might also consider a maximum size, so that you might want to attract the smaller, non-intrusive ones that would help bolster our tax base. I'm just brainstorming here. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I know we've heard from everyone on the board, I think. Yes, we have, even, Tom as well. So I'm gonna just make a few comments. Myself, I don't have any kind of prepared written statement, but I guess to start, I'll say that I like the idea of doing a moratorium to give us time. I support that, but I think that if we're doing it, that we should have something in the use table other than prohibited. I don't think it makes sense to prohibit it and do a moratorium at the same time. There's, I guess, going back to, when Michael was speaking and he was giving kind of some context of it, right? He talked about how we kind of tweaked things a little bit after having our conversation with Donna, and kind of when we were talking about this at our prior meeting, we're going back and forth like this, and they said, all right, let's do something temporary, a moratorium to give us time to do it, right? And not really, grasping it. It's like, okay, that seems right, and we'll put it in as a no, and then and we're also taking into account whether or not the definition of light industry, as it's currently written in our bylaw, would allow a data center. And as anyone, who's spoken with lawyers about zoning might be able to guess, or, just to let the public know, you could probably argue it either way. You could easily argue that the definition of light industry that we have written does not include data centers based on what it says. You could also say, maybe it does, right? And the thing is data centers are somewhat eccentric use when it comes to defining land use, right? It's a little bit, is it commercial? Is it industrial, right? It's kind of a little bit of both, right? It's not some of your more clear cut, cookie cutter, commercial or industrial, right? So there's this question of how does that definition leave us? And I guess, so that I think fed into, the idea of prohibiting it, defining it and then prohibiting it, because we didn't want to have anything that was unclear about, where things stood. But the other thing that came out of it was that the use table, the section in the use table is not going to be included in the moratorium. You can't have, the use expire with the moratorium. So if we have it in as prohibited, and then our moratorium expires and we do nothing, then it sits there as prohibited, right? If we have it as allowed by special permit, then it's if we do nothing, then it would be allowed by special permit. And we would have a definition and we would be able to regulate it that way, given our bylaws it stands. Or if we did nothing and we get a project, we can decide to interpret light industry. If we were to get a, if we got a application for a mega project, we'd probably say this does not fit the definition of light energy and therefore it's prohibited. Or if we got a small project we like, we might say, oh, well, we can fit this into light industry. We want the tax revenue, we'll do it. And then if we got then we would face the consequences of, okay, now what are we gonna do if we get an application for a big project? Obviously, there are some people here that don't want to get too far into the weeds on this. I guess all this to say, my inclination is to make the commitment to come back with a proposed amendment at the next town meeting. And I'll caveat it saying that we can have a backup amendment, a fail-safe to remove the provisions allowing it, but I think we should put it in as allowed by special permit in at least some districts, not necessarily all districts, to kind of say, all right, we're interested in the possibility of a project of allowing the use, right? We have it as, we're going to allow it with a special permit. We have a moratorium because we need to figure out what our regulations are, right? That sends the right signal to industry and lays out a path for people to come here and possibly do a project that would be acceptable, right? And as we've heard some people say, it all depends on scale. And, when I talk about, the favorability of a project, I mean, there may be some that would be a good fit, right? You have the potential to sell, for a municipal light plant to sell broadband, and that could reduce the cost of internet for people across town if that was a revenue-making deal. I saw a post on Nextdoor today. Someone was complaining about one fee or another. Not that this would necessarily address that, but obviously, people are concerned about every little cost they have. And obviously, yes, it would be revenue, tax revenue, if a project like this went in. If it was a nonprofit, I'm sure we would negotiate some sort of a pilot payment. But if it was a for-profit enterprise that came forward with a project, then it's going to either be in commercial or industrial. We have to figure all that out. That's what the moratorium is for. So it's, I would like to see us turn around and commit to, coming back with a bylaw and saying that, we're going to allow it by a special permit so that, we'll be able to impose conditions on it. And nobody on this board, myself included, wants to have a project come into town that's gonna leak diesel fuel into the ground that's going to deplete aquifers or anything like that. So that's my main, that's my bone to pick with the amendment as it's written. I think we should allow it with the moratorium. And additionally, I would say we should probably come up with some sort of a size limitation to avoid further confusion about some sort of huge project that we clearly are not interested in allowing in town. So that's what I would like to see. And that's my comment for the public hearing. One last thing is, in my recent personal life, I've encountered, you know, I have two children. Okay, my son is 6 and my daughter is 4, and I'm bumping into, you know, friends or colleagues whose children are, you know, have either just graduated college or are, you know, otherwise maybe, you know, didn't make it in college, and, you know, the kids are living at home and they're having a hard time finding a decent job, right? So, you know, this is something that could also produce a couple of jobs. You know, maybe not if it's just on one of those windowless brick buildings we're talking about. I mean, that's a possibility too, but if it's something that's bigger than that, but smaller than a warehouse, I mean, that could be a couple jobs, and that's, you know, that would be good to see. So that's that wraps it up. Now I see Michael's got his hand up there.
I have a process question and maybe a comment, but do you want to, I mean, ultimately we have to close the hearing and then we have to decide what we want to do in terms of approving this and going forward so we can have a report to town meeting, et cetera. So do you, I think when we had a conversation way back months ago about when you close a public hearing, I guess the question is, if we close it, we can keep talking to each other, but the public can't contribute any more information. So I've got thoughts about what you said, but I don't want to hold open the hearing if unnecessarily. Like, we can close the hearing and then debate if we want to, you know, approve this amendment and propose it to town meeting or not. I think that's probably the better way to go. But if you want to include all of our discussions as part of a hearing, I can share that now.
You know, I don't see a problem with keeping the hearing open to,
Okay.
you know, if I mean, you know, so I mean, you know, keeping the hearing open, you're saying that we would, you know, we're just going to have a lengthy report on the contents of the hearing.
No. I mean, we can discuss it all now. It's just that I think if one closes it, then the public can't give us any information. We're allowed to talk to each other. I can go either way. I just want to know what you were thinking, because I do have comments. I just want to know what line of the public hearing ending or staying open did you want me to comment on? Because we've also chimed in, as you pointed out.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think we could leave it open for a little bit longer, and you know, we can. So I guess, you know, did you have a comment too?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have a comment, why don't you go with that?
Yeah. So I strongly disagree. You know, in terms of the use table, you know, which is what we talked about last time. But I think it's got to be prohibited and all for now. I guess my two responses is, one is, the message I would want to send industry is that we want to be protective and thoughtful, and therefore you're going to have to wait till town meeting. I don't want to send a message saying, if we don't get our shit together, that, you know, it's you can come in, because we don't have the information. We have no understanding of how we would do the use table right now. None of us could articulate special permit, site plan review, Lake Biola, rural residential. We don't have the information to discern what the use table would look like. And so if that sort of rolled into operational, it would be ill-informed. So I got a huge problem with that. I think, more technically speaking, what we usually do with proposals for amending the zoning bylaws is we bundle one warrant where we'll say, we're adding or changing the use table, or adding a definition, and then we have this section, which is what I articulated. We could easily, because I mean, the source of, I think, your concern is that either you think someone's got ill intent or that the town wouldn't support an amendment. In either case, we'd get stuck with having prohibition. But we could easily split it out and have the use table be an amendment and 8.13 be an amendment. So if people voted down what we were proposing for size and scope and water and cooling and all the stuff that we would put in 813, even if they voted it down, we could have the warrant be separated with the use table, because by that time we'll actually know what we would want in a use table. So instead of bundling them together and saying, this is what we're doing as a package concept for data centers, you could split them out and basically send the message, even if, town meeting votes down the narrative regarding 813, the use table would be up for consideration. But I think my biggest concern is right now, I don't know what I would responsibly put into a use table. We just don't have that information. I think we sort of established that we have to do lots of research. It's guesswork.
Thank you. Steve. You're muted, Steve.
Michael answered a question I posed before about if we're putting forth this amendment, that is a signal that we're considering a bylaw to allow data centers, the details of which none of us know yet. So there's your signal to industry. Wait a year. Shutesbury is going to be coming up with a bylaw that may not outright prohibit data centers, but once we understand more about data centers, the type, size, water use, all those variables, then we can open it up. Then we'll have a real responsible zoning bylaw and a signal to industry. Wait a year. They're considering it. We're not saying outright it can't happen in Shutesbury.
Thank you, Steve. Ashley.
The whole procedural piece is it is like a magic that I don't understand. So I'm working on that part. I'm wondering, is it possible that we could have some sort of compromise where maybe the prohibition expires at a certain point if no, okay. All right. And then, I was thinking like if that expired by the time that June 30th rolls around and it became something else in the use table, but okay.
Donna was really clear about that. She said a use is a use. It's not time limited. So you have to say what the use is.
Okay. So I hear your concern, Nathan. I mean, who knows what could happen in the next 6-7 months? One of us we have associate members that, the board could look different in 7 months. Things could change. Who knows? That said, I personally feel committed to creating a bylaw. And just based on the careful attention that I've seen from members of the board, I feel like we're on board. And I think the way we're wording it, we're not intending to prohibit these forever. We're doing a moratorium so we can study it and be intentional and informed and try to figure out something that could work for our town. I mean, just based on the questions and comments tonight, I really appreciate Michael Pill and answering some questions about state law and, things that you've said. And I appreciate hearing from Gail. Like, I think there's a lot of interest in the town on how to do this and how to do it the right way, or do right by our townspeople. So I have to respectfully disagree with you. I feel good about moving forward as we have been on the path that we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks. And hopefully we'll come up with something that feels good to at least most of us. But I share your concerns. Like, is it possible that our prohibition could expire, the moratorium comes and goes and we still have a prohibition? And that's a concern for sure. But I'm certainly committed to trying to not let that happen. I know it's just words at this point, but That's my comment.
Thank you, Ashley. I would just kind of further clarify what I said, in addition to the, idea of, okay, let's say it's a special permit and then we're gonna, have a moratorium, right? Because I don't think it makes sense to have a moratorium on a use that you're prohibiting. In addition to that, is Michael Pill has brought up, and as I brought up in our last meeting, we have a prohibitive bylaw, right? So if it's not in the use table, it's prohibited. I think if we want to clean things up, instead of putting it in the use table as prohibited and creating a contradiction in the plain language of our bylaw, then what we would do is we would clarify the definition. We could even just put in a definition of data center. Even just putting in a definition of data center as of what that is something that could potentially, it's a separate definition from light industry, right? And we could modify the definition of light industry to say, like real goods or tangible goods, something like that, so that there's no doubt that we're not talking about a data center. I mean, I think it's in addition to the, I don't want to give the message that, we're prohibiting it up front and saying we're doing a moratorium, which I think is empty. But also I don't want to put in something in our use table that's prohibited across the board, because it's a table of allowable uses and everything else that's not in there is prohibited. So that's, I think, the two-pronged reasoning to kind of add that clarification. And I understand that everyone who said they disagree probably still disagrees, with at least with making it allowable by special permit. And if that's where you stand, I would ask that we at least consider going the other way and clarifying some of the definitions, possibly adding data center in there as a definition. And we have Michael Pill here with us, and we can also continue to we can get Donna back on the phone and say, all right, we're either gonna modify the definition of light industry, or we're gonna add in a definition for data centers, which would differentiate data centers from light industry, or both. So that's my suggestion. And we can I'll go to Michael now, who has his hand up.
So, as we discussed last time, we have a special town meeting in 22 days. And so coming up with new language and getting Donna on the phone and coming up with a whole other thing, it doesn't work in terms of getting the warrant out in a reasonable time, because we have to let the populace know what we're actually proposing for a warrant. We were able to get this hearing scheduled at an appropriate time. I think what you're suggesting creates more problems. I mean, if we miss the window of a special town meeting, then everything's for naught. So that doesn't make sense. And for everyone who's worried about finances, I would not go back to town meeting and say, oh, we're maybe getting sued because someone wants to do it this way and we're objecting, and we want to defend our bylaw again. This is the clearest way where it doesn't cost any money for town. We are in September. We're talking about, May, maybe June. So that's 9 months. It's really not a big inconvenience for anyone who's looking to develop something, because they have to build it, and we want to do it right. It seems like the consensus is that we don't know enough to come up with a good regulation now, although we all committed to doing that. And so we can't do tinkering, this is the governmental process. We have a short window to do this. We came up with something we agreed to last time in terms of the vote, in terms of how we wanted to approach it with the moratorium. It seems, I don't understand why prohibiting it with the commitment that once we know how we want to allow it, assuming we want to allow it, that's just part of the package deal of the thinking. Right now it's fabrication. I mean, I don't think anyone on the call could articulate what you would do. You know, why a special permit or across the board special permit, a special permit in some versus not others. We don't have the information. I think what we're trying to do is do it responsibly. So, but just to the short point is, we can't do a lot of tinkering, and we can't schedule with Donna, and we can't come back and have another meeting and still get it out in a warrant, because we have to report to the select board what the final version is. Right now, they have this as in the file. They've seen it. They're waiting for a final one, assuming that we propose it. If we come up with something totally different, we're going to miss the deadline. And I think that subverts what the intent was, which is to get something responsibly in time for a special town meeting.
What is the deadline for the getting the warrant?
I think it's 2 weeks, perhaps. I mean, they wanted it by sometime in the next few days, actually. I want to say today, but I remember talking to Brendan and saying, I mean, Mateo might know, but when I gave him this version, I said, we're meeting, we'll let you know soon.
Mateo.
They're voting to set it on Friday.
Thank you. Jeff?
I agree strongly with Michael. That's all I have to say.
Steve?
From a procedural point of view, how do we move forward in this meeting to get to a point where we vote on the amendment or not?
I think we're getting pretty close to that, Steve.
I mean, do we have to first close the public meeting? Okay.
I mean, I think we can vote while the hearing's open or not. It doesn't matter. We have to close the hearing before we adjourn. Move on to our, but it's Ashley?
Just a quick thought, since we're talking about potential scenarios that, none of us know what's going to happen in the next year, but let's say we get rid of the prohibition for the next year and open it up to a special permit process, still with the moratorium, still with the intent to create a bylaw, and we do get a special permit for one of these things. That's going to take a lot of our time and a lot of our capacity in our meetings. If something like that, which I think we're all pretty clear is probably not going to happen unless somebody knows something I don't know. It's going to take a lot of our time, and it might be more difficult for us to craft a good bylaw related to this if we're dealing with a special permit.
But Ashley, if we have a moratorium, then we're not dealing with a special permit because there's a moratorium in effect.
So this is something I'm missing. Can somebody explain, can we do a moratorium? Okay, so your issue is that you don't want it to be on the use table, but you still would like there to be, you don't want it to be prohibited on the use table, but you're still okay with the moratorium?
If you look at any other moratorium, it's going to be for a use that's either allowed by right or that's allowed. And you need to, maybe there's something that's changed in the industry, or there's been some changes at the state level, something or other. And you say, okay, you know what, we don't have this properly regulated. We need time to regulate. You do a moratorium. So no applications can be, properly submitted during this time because a moratorium is in effect.
Mm-hmm.
There's no point in doing a moratorium for a use that is prohibited across the board. Why would you set a time limit? It's prohibited. If you want to allow it, then you do the research and allow it after you're done with your research.
And the reason why this is different from the Wheelock situation is because of the Dover Amendment?
You got it. And that difference cannot be understated, especially when we're hearing things like, we talked about doing a solar bylaw, decided we didn't need it. Well, you did because there was an exemption in the zoning act for it.
Mm-hmm.
When there's no such exemption and we don't call it out as an allowed use, then, there is no, it's prohibited. And another thing for us to keep in mind is that case law says that the courts will give a huge amount of deference to local municipal boards, planning boards, and their interpretation of their own bylaw. So that's my piece on that. And I understand, I can see where people are standing. Is there anyone who at this point who might be comfortable either saying, all right, we'll put in maybe a special permit in the Forest Conservation District, we'll limit the size of the building to, say 1,000 square feet. And all right, I see 4 against. So I mean that calls it. So if someone wants to, so we can stop, because we don't have any votes to override that. Okay. Is there anyone else that's here that would like to make a comment? I see Tom, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks. I was just wondering, if there were no moratorium, how would that affect the ability of the planning board to try to craft a bylaw about this?
Well, if there were no moratorium, then we could just take as long as we want and craft a bylaw whenever we get to it.
Because it's already prohibited.
It's already prohibited unless we decided we wanted to interpret the definition of light industry as covering data centers, which, obviously we could easily choose not to do. I mean, I have stated, I don't think it meets the definition. I mean, we could do it. I think if we did do that, we would open ourselves to the problem of, okay, now we have, we said that we can do data centers as light industry. We have a nice little small brick building like Keith was talking about, but then someone else comes in, they want to do a 5,000 square foot project, and now it's like, well, you said it could be light industry, right? That's a problem. I agree that's a problem. I don't want to be in that situation. I don't want to allow them under light industry, but I think that if we're going to do something, we should do something that makes, that different than what we're doing. But
okay.
Do you have anything else?
Yeah, so let's say that it is prohibited, for the purposes, just for my next question, according to our current bylaw. Whether or not the moratorium were to pass as written now at special town meeting would not necessarily affect any ability for the planning board to address it as a topic for a bylaw or for definition down the line. Is that correct? Like
That's
whether
correct. The restriction on a proposed zoning amendment that is voted down at town meeting, I don't believe can be brought back after a certain number of years unless the planning board recommends it, something like that.
Okay. I was
I'm
just
pretty
wondering
sure
if the area of like, so yeah, how it would go either way at town meeting, how that would affect the future.
It would be almost, the changes that are proposed do very little, in my opinion.
Okay, thanks.
Michael.
Yeah, I want to respond to what Tom's question. So I'm seeking to achieve crystal clear. So what we've experienced from our lived experience as a town is that any lawyer can argue anything. So one can look at the letters on the page in our zoning bylaw and say, if something is not named as a use, that it's prohibited. A lawyer can argue that it is a light industry, in which case we have to go to court and say that, no, this is our intent. So we get sucked into legal stuff. The whole idea of doing this is to make it crystal clear that this is how we define data centers. We're saying that they're not allowed for the period, and they're not allowed. Our understanding is that when we come back with newly revised regulatory language in 8.13, that we would simultaneously update the use table to be aligned with what our understanding is. So that intent is to keep us out of the legal quagmire that we just lived through. And this is just clarity. I think it's the most responsible way to make sure. Otherwise, we sit around and we say, let's hope that someone doesn't come forward with the lawyer who wants to sue us and say that this is what it is and there's precedent. I'd rather not sit on my hands worrying about that until town meeting happens. I'd rather know that as of September 30th, we can actually do this in the clear, not worrying, thinking about it, having nothing on the horizon. And then the last point I would just say, because it came up, Donna did not object to the fact that the use table was in there. She didn't say, oh, this is duplicative, don't do it. You know, she clarified that if we were going to do the use table and the definitions, we had to have the 8.13 as an additional section that explicitly said it was a moratorium, because to Ashley's question, you can't have a use that's time-based, time-limited. You know, originally we thought we'd have the use table, it would time out after, you know, a year, and she said you can't do that. But at no point did Donna say, oh, you shouldn't do the use table, you don't need the use table. It never came up. So I think my sense is all three are needed, or all three are at least she was okay with. So I'm really trying to just keep us out of the legal mess.
Thank you, Michael. Keith?
So if a company really wanted one of these things in Shutesbury and hired a lawyer to argue that it would fall under light industry, we still would review it as under a special permit under all those criteria we have for any special permit. Is that correct?
If we were forced to review it under a special permit, then that would be correct. I don't know, I don't suspect it would be very difficult for us to say, no, it's not light industry. You know, they sue us, and then, you know, I don't think I don't believe that the same risk is posed as was with the use of solar, because solar is protected by the zoning act and data centers are not. So it's like comparing apples to oranges, and I don't think it's a very useful comparison if we're trying to, you know, be clear on
But
it.
again, even if it comes in our hands, we're not powerless. We still have to review it under our guidelines for a special permit, which are relatively extensive and relatively open to be interpreted kind of strictly if we wanted to. So again, it's not like somebody could march in and do what they wanted to without, again, it's not, you know, the Dover Amendment doesn't apply. And we do have some general criteria for any project, right?
That's correct. Michael, and I'm just gonna say, you know, we're going a little bit back and forth here. I'm ready to hear a hearing, I'm sorry, I'm ready to hear a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make that
And
motion.
move this thing along. Okay, we have a motion to close the hearing. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Michael seconds. Okay, do we have any further discussion, or do we have any discussion on the motion to close the hearing? Okay, I will call the roll. I'm gonna start with Bressler.
Can someone state what we're doing here? Call the roll on,
Closing the hearing.
closing.
the hearing.
Thank you.
Closing the public hearing. And then we'll yeah, we'll do another vote after that, after this. Okay, all right, Bressler, you said aye, is
Aye.
that correct? Okay, Hasty,
Aye.
let's see, Dick
Aye.
Pycroft,
Aye.
Weston,
Aye.
Seifert,
Aye.
and I will vote aye. To close the public hearing, the motion carries unanimously. Okay, now the public hearing has been closed. Thank you to all the members of the public as well as members of the board who provided comment. I appreciate that. We all appreciate that very much. It's very important. All right, now, so now we have.
Can I make a
the,
motion?
I was just gonna note that our next agenda item is, sorry.
Well, we've got to vote on this.
That's, I know, all right. Next agenda item is to, lost my calendar, but yes, yeah, we're gonna be, discussing what's gonna go into the, PB recommendation and voting to finalize the warrant article, so. Yes, go ahead and, make a motion.
Well, I would move that the planning board adopt the warrant article as proposed to present to September 30th, 2025 special town meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, so-
I second.
and- Well, we see, we got Steve on there, so Michael moves and, Steve seconds, Jeff thirds. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, to, approve the warrant article to, finalize the warrant article as it is written. Is there any discussion on this? No, okay. All right, I'll call the roll. Bressler,
Aye.
DeCara,
Aye.
Hasty. You're muted. Keith, you're muted. Keith, you're still muted. I don't know if you voted or in the affirmative or in the negative. Okay, Keith is an aye. We'll say, Pycroft
Aye.
and, Seifert,
Aye.
Weston.
Aye.
Okay, and, I will vote no. So the motion carries. The warrant will go as written. And now, additionally, we have, I guess I had minutes in between, but that's all right, we can get to that. I have drafting planning board report to, special town meeting and telling recommendations pertaining to proposed zoning amendments. So I guess it might be a little bit much to try and actually draft that up here. How do we want to handle that?
In the past, before we had Mateo on board, I think I would draft something and send it for people to comment on, and then we would finalize it somehow. Mateo could do it. I could draft it and send it to Mateo, and he could send it out for people to comment on. I think, and you could review it at the, and send it along to the select board. I don't think we won't have time for another meeting, so.
No, and that's, yeah, the, when is, the meeting again?
The 30th.
30th.
Yeah, and so the way it works is we either have to send something to town meeting in advance of town meeting, which normally we send it to the select board and then would post it on the website. Or if we don't get our act together in time to do it, we can have our oral report at town meeting. I always find that a little bit, it'd be nicer to have something in advance. You don't have to worry about remembering to do it and doing it correctly at the meeting itself. But those are the two options.
Does the planning board have to vote on a final, report? Or just kind of agree on the contents of it? I mean, the report doesn't need to, it needs to say that,
It's mostly I think if Mateo's phenomenal in terms of minutes. I mean, if really it's a matter of documenting what happened at the hearing and then what the outcome is. So, I gave a summary, Michael Pill commented, Gail commented, Arlene commented, etc. And what their points were, and then what our decision and action were, so as we're presenting the town. So there's not much beyond that. It's really sort of how you characterize what people said, which we can, like I was saying, either Mateo can sort of convert his minutes into a report, or I can work from his minutes and just sort of create something and send it to you.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay,
So, let's hear a motion to have, Michael draft the report and, incorporate, information from Mateo's minutes and, the public hearing into it, as well as the, outcome of the vote we just took that said we're gonna send the warrant article, for special town meeting as written. And, does anyone want to make that motion? You can make it for yourself, Michael, if you want, I guess, or say so move, what have you.
so moved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion, questions? Okay, I'll call the roll. Hasty,
Hey, I gotta abstain. I'm losing internet. I
Okay.
couldn't hear half of what you said, so abstain on this.
okay. Bressler,
Aye.
Seifert,
Aye.
Pycroft,
Aye.
Weston,
Aye.
Bakera.
Aye.
I'm an aye. Okay, good. All right, we'll move on to our prior agenda item, which is to review and approve minutes from 8/11 and 8/27. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from August 11th, 2025?
So moved.
A motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Michael moves, Steve second. Any discussion? I've got one. Under the discussion of data centers section, let's see, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's say paragraph 6 under the section on bylaws. I would just like to incorporate a reference to the section of the bylaw that notes that uses not listed in the use table are prohibited. I'm pretty sure I said that, called that out specifically during the meeting. I would like that to be included in the minutes. Dale? Get a
Yep, I got that.
beautiful. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the roll. Pycroft,
Aye.
Seifert,
Aye.
Hasty,
Aye.
Bakera,
Aye.
Wrestler,
Aye.
Weston,
Aye.
and I'm on. All right, minutes, the motion carries unanimously. Minutes from August 11th, 2025 have been approved.
Bless you.
Oh, thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve minutes from August 27th, 2025? This was our special meeting to announce the news of the the lawsuit being dismissed. Do I hear that motion?
I'm pleased to make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Daycare moves, Pycroft seconds to approve the minutes from August 27th, 2025. Is there any discussion on these minutes?
I have a comment on, I sent it to Mateo. Mateo, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Do you remember the comment? I don't, unfortunately, I didn't print it. The slight change that I made in the minutes of that meeting.
Yeah, it was just a slight change of wording in how your remarks were described in the last paragraph where you say it says Weston thanks to Kiara. And then it says something, he also thanks the select board for their support. So I folded that revision into the draft that's up there now.
Okay, that's all I said. I just, I think there was a little bit more information or something that was written that didn't exactly express what I meant. So what Matteo just read about me thanking the select board and that he changed the wording of that meeting is fine by me. So I approve the minutes with that slight adjustment.
Anyone else? No? All right, I'll call the roll. Pycroft,
Aye.
Seifert,
Aye.
Hasty,
Aye.
Bakera,
Aye.
Ressler,
Aye.
Weston.
Aye.
I'm an aye. The minutes from August 27th have been approved unanimously. The motion carries unanimously. All right, that wraps up minutes for today. So we have an item for discussion of town moderator inquiry pertaining to town meeting. Did anyone read the email from our town moderator about town meeting? Or rather, is there anyone who did not?
Can you refresh us on the substance?
I
think
have
would
not
be,
read it.
okay,
I have not read it.
Let's see. I'm gonna.
Are you talking about the thoughts about town meeting
Yeah.
bylaw?
Yeah, I'm gonna, let's see.
Yeah. I responded to her.
You know, I meant to respond and just say that I was gonna put it on the agenda and okay, she says, hello, folks, it's town moderator. I would like to suggest the select board sponsor an article to amend the town meeting date bylaw. This suggestion is not new and certainly not the first to suggest this. However, first, I would like to get your input. Be sure that it is something that would be helpful to all boards and committees that you all represent. Below, I will explain and list 2 questions I have for you. Can anyone see this? Is it a little too small? How's that? Is that better? As of now, the bylaw says that the date of annual town meeting will be on the last Saturday of April. There are 2 changes I would like to make to this. One change would be shifting the date from April to the first or second Saturday in May. It seems that there's a general consensus that April ultimately feels too early to many, as Grace has pointed out, the town clerk. Question 1, if the town were to hold annual town meeting on the first or second Saturday in May rather than in April, would this work better for the boards or committees that you represent? Another change would be to include in the bylaw a date for fall town meeting each year. Considering that in the last 19 years, Shutesbury has held 16 special town meetings, it seems that making a date predictable and reliable would be helpful for voters, boards, and committees alike. Particularly with the number of hours Shutesbury tends to spend in ATM each year, I believe it would increase expediency and therefore voter participation and accessibility for all articles on the warrant if we split annual town meeting business into 2. A citizen's guide to town meetings, the Secretary of the Commonwealth writes that a town may divide its business meetings into 2 meetings, one business meeting at the beginning of the year, in the spring, The focus is primarily on the budget, finances, and taxes. The second business meeting is held in the fall. It is split. It is still part of the annual town meeting. The focus is on zoning, planning, and bylaws. Question 2. If the town were to amend the town meeting date bylaw so that we held a fall town meeting on the first or second Saturday in November, the focus on zoning, planning, and bylaws, would this adjustment work for the committee or board you represent? I look forward to hearing your perspective of what will best meet the needs of Shutesbury's boards and committees and the town as a whole. Thank you for your insights. Nettie.
Can I share what I wrote back, Nathan?
Yeah, please. You want to share your screen?
No, I can just summarize it. I mean, it was a longer email. I'm happy to share. I was sort of, I don't know if I was wearing my chair of the ECAC or planning board or just old fart in town. I'm starting to realize I've been around a long time. So the first thing I said, because I don't think Nettie realizes that for years we had annual town meeting on the first Saturday of May. So there was this assumption that we always did it in April, but in fact, going back to May is what we used to do for the longest time. In my memory, at least 10 or 15 years. And the issue there is really driven by the state budget development. So the governor's budget comes out in January, it doesn't really mean much. Then the House of Representatives comes out in February, and then the Senate comes out in April, both of those connected to the same time as school vacations. So the complaint is always that the town is trying to make financial decisions about the town annual budget before the state has come up with the final figures. So even in May, we didn't have that information. So that was what I wrote there, that, you know, later is better. Later in May is better if you can figure out how to avoid Memorial Day weekend. Early June is best. And then the other big thing I said for the second meeting is also financially driven. That Mateo has the stats on this. I think we've done a ridiculous number of special town meetings in the fall, but my remembering is that almost exclusively we have a fall special town meeting for financial reasons. We have to approve a grant, or we have to move some money or stuff. And so the idea that we're going to do financial stuff around budgets in the spring and then non-financial stuff in the fall is not based on the reality of what informs special town meetings in the fall. So I don't know where Nettie's falling down on this decision, but that's what I conveyed. And, I mean, knowing that we would have a special town meeting date is sort of cool. So we don't, it's not a question mark, but it's not driven by the other stuff.
You know, that's an interesting point. I think that, you know, it's like kind of best laid plans, and then you might still get this situation that comes out. You know, we have the meeting in November, but then you need to deal with something in late September or whatever, right? It's rough.
Yeah.
Okay, does anyone else have anything they want to add? I mean, it's Tom?
Yeah, as far as I understand it, the select board has the ultimate authority to set the town meeting date, even if the town bylaw sets it at the third Saturday of September or a time in May. So I'm all for having it as late as possible and practical. And I sometimes question about the need for a town bylaw to set it at a certain date, since the select board always has that ultimate authority anyway. About the other factor, is it saying that it wouldn't be allowed to put a financial article on a town meeting in the fall if the town meeting in the fall were generally dedicated to non-financial matters? Like, would it exclude that? Or could it also just be added, even though it wouldn't be the typical thing, the way it's being proposed? Does anybody know that?
It seems like Mateo has his hand up. Why don't you go ahead and
you're absolutely correct, Tom. The language of the proposed bylaw that's going to go before special town meeting is exclusively about the dates. So it doesn't say anything about financial matters can only be considered in the spring and bylaws can only be considered in the fall. It's just the dates. It's just that customarily in the many towns that do split their annual town meeting, that's how it usually breaks down. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't consider a financial matter in the fall or a bylaw in the spring. And likewise, it also, because it's an annual town meeting, it's not a special town meeting. So if something like, for example, the insurance situation the town is in right now, which is provoking the special town meeting, if something like that came up, you could still call a special town meeting and have it be legitimately a 1 or 2 article special town meeting, as opposed to suddenly having a rush of articles like we do this year that are, properly speaking, annual town meeting business, getting packed into a special town meeting.
Thank you, Matteo. Will you, is it true that, more or less, Nettie, the town moderator, has already, set a course for the bylaw amendments at this point?
Yeah, the bylaw amendment is on the warrant article that the select board is going to be considering, or is going to be finalizing on Friday.
So we're, as far as feedback goes, at this point, we're a little late to the party.
Unless, I guess, the planning board wanted to communicate its views to the select board before they voted on Friday. Because they have not finalized the warrant.
Okay, okay. Does anyone want to do anything on this, or should we move on to our next item?
I have a question, but I think we should move on when we're done. It's just a question. I'm just wondering, like, so we have 2 town meetings, what if it turns out there's nothing for one of them? I know that's highly unlikely, but do we still have to have it?
No,
Okay.
if you cover all the material you need to cover in the spring, that's great. But given the history of Shutesbury,
Yeah.
we've had many special town meetings over the past 10 years that are longer than our annual town meetings, or even better attended by annual town meetings.
Yeah.
So
They're often for big issues. Yeah.
it's hard
Okay,
to
thank
imagine
you.
that situation coming up, though.
Thanks for everyone who shared there. So. Okay, we have the next item is update relating to pending release of executive session minutes. We can just really quickly touch on this at some point soon. If not, we'll either schedule something off cycle or do it at our next meeting. Probably an executive session to first review and approve draft minutes, and then decide, review them for the purpose of deciding whether or not they should be made public. And generally, we've gotten some information from Donna that they'll be made public since the litigation has come to a close. But is there anything you want to add, Michael?
Well, 2 things. One is, I think Mateo's got a folder with all of the executive session minutes, so he could, whenever you decide it's appropriate to share, I think you can just easily share that out, and then, the executive session minutes, so they shouldn't be shared, but the whole idea is to go through them, and then we would review them like we do every other minutes in terms of wording and making changes, etc. And that's one meeting in executive session. And then just to clarify, based on what Donna wrote to Nathan and Mateo and I, at a separate meeting in executive session, we would have the conversation about releasing them or not releasing. So the first one is just to make sure we get the wording right, and everyone says, these are the minutes of that meeting, it actually reflects it. That would be one meeting. And then a separate meeting, once we've approved that version of those minutes, we would go one by one and say, we're approving to release or not. And I think that's probably, we should double check with Donna just to make sure, the idea is they have to be released if they are no longer meet the criteria for having them not be released. And so that's sort of the more debatable area, but we can easily go through and make sure that they reflect in that first meeting, what the minutes of the meeting reflect. Mateo, is that what you got? As our clerk?
Yeah, that's correct. They need to be reviewed and approved and then voted for release in it's a separate vote.
Separate vote. It doesn't need to be a separate meeting, but it's, just for logistical purposes, you could, it's gonna take time possibly, and, you could, split it up any way you want, review and approve in one meeting, vote to release in another meeting, or review and approve some, release some, review and approve the rest, of release some, whatever works scheduling wise.
Yeah, there is one loose end that I need to follow up on Donna about, which is some of the meetings were held as joint meetings with the select board. And I don't know if we can release those minutes before the select board. I don't know how that works. Basically.
So here, I mean, and Michael, you can chime in if you think it might be different, but when there's a joint meeting of the planning board and the select board, if the planning board has a quorum, then we need to, it's still a meeting of the planning board that requires minutes. There's not one set of minutes for the joint session. That's what we've done. It could be worth clarifying it, but I think
that part's accurate. I think the tricky part is, hypothetically, if the planning board said everything in this set of minutes is fine for the public to see, and the select board had the opposite opinion, and they said, oh no, there's still stuff in there that we think would compromise us, based on the lawsuit, that you don't want to have one hand releasing and the other hand thinking not. So I think finding out how that works. Clearly we're separate boards, but we're one town. So I think it's more a political thing than a legal thing, but I think it's worth Mateo sort of checking in, if that makes sense. And easily it could be the other way around. We could say, hey, we don't want to expose that. And the select board says yes. That just seems like it would be awkward. But you are correct, they're separate minutes.
all right. So stay tuned for that. Next on the agenda, we are gonna just quickly touch base on the special permits we had for Mark Whiteman a couple years back. I've been, I think we've been keeping an eye on this. In terms of, when you issue a special permit, you've got a period of time where you have to start work or the permit expires. I reached out to Don on this issue, and I'm glad I did, because long story short, there's more time now due to the Leads Act. So I will forward what Donna sent me on that, and I think it's an additional 2 years. So we've got nothing at this time, and the whoever is managing that lot over the currently or into the next over the next 2 years or so is going to have their time to get their ducks in a row if they want to move forward with it.
Nathan, in terms of the way the agenda was written, we gave a special permit and the ZBA gave the variance, right?
Yeah, what did I put on the agenda?
You said special permit and variance. So I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I mean, the ZBA issued a variance. Variances, the act notwithstanding would expire after a year. And that's, so it's, I don't know if it would have to be the zoning board that would, have to do something about that, or if, I think, it's possible the planning board could be an actor if there was an expired variance.
Yeah, well, that's what I think, because remember, we approved it based on the ZBA doing something, then ZBA did the variance and they had to come back and then we approved it again. So if their thing expires, then our thing becomes questionable.
Right. Well, that's why I put it in there. I put it in there so we could discuss it, and
That's great. Thanks for tracking it.
Yeah, and I'm glad I got a chance to hear from Donna because now it's clear cut. We don't have any open questions on it. I mean, obviously, we don't want to be bungling around and doing anything exceeding our authority or anything like that. So yeah, we're good for now on that. But it's good, even though it's I just got that email from her today, from Donna about the Leads Act. So even, having that information, I would still want to kind of just have it up there because of that timing and, not everyone knows about that act. I didn't know about it. So it's good to kind of just get it out there and have this quick conversation. Okay. Member updates. Does anyone have anything they want to provide an update on? An email from Gail today, commending Michael for the feat of providing written comment to like every step of the way along with I think it's the new citing process, and apparently not even none of the NGOs in the state that typically get involved in this sort of thing went so far as to do that. So Michael, I think it's safe to say you've been busy.
It's fun to see.
Yeah, so good work, Michael.
Thank you for calling that out. Some could say get a life, but
All right, it's 9 o'clock, folks. Does anyone else have anything anything? Okay. All right. I don't think there's any unanticipated business, so I would love to hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion? Steve dropped off, so I think we're on the.
No, he's
I'll
there.
call the roll.
No,
Oh,
I'm
he's
here.
there. He's there. I'm sorry.
I'm here.
It was just it's I don't know. I mean, yeah, okay.
Because of the connection.
We lost Keith. Okay. Okay. All right. I'll call the roll. Weston. Jeff Weston.
Looks like he's frozen.
Yeah, he might be
Or
frozen.
really
Okay.
contemplative, one of the two.
It's rough. It's rough. Okay. Take care.
Aye.
Bressler.
Hi.
Pycroft.
Aye.
Seifert.
Aye.
I'm an aye. And Jeff, we're gonna, wish you the best with your internet connection there. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
We'll be in touch.
See you all.
Okay?
Thanks, Nathan.
Good night.
Adios. Good night.